we're really slacking on attendance. All right. So just a little announcement. We have this week and next week, and then we're done. And from now on, what we're going to do is we're going to do one class a year instead of start over again and start it over again. So when we finish next week, we will be off until January. And in January, we'll start again. Okay. So step 11 is the culmination of all the other steps. Okay. Step 1 had to be taken so we could do step 2 because we couldn't see the solution until we understood what the problem was. Okay. And those 2 steps gave us what we needed to make a decision. Next, we had to carry out that decision, but there were things that blocked us from God. And we couldn't get on with the thing, with this turning our will and our lives over to the care of God until we removed the things that blocked us from God. So we did steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. As a result of the actions of these steps, we removed what was blocking us from God so we can carry out the decision we made in step 3. So steps 3 and 11 are the pillars of the steps, actually. The steps have 2 crucial points. 1, the turning over of our will in step 3. And 2, the receiving of God's will in step 11. Okay? So all of that had to happen in order for us to get to the point where, and before we go off for step 11, I just want to say that, have you ever had somebody you love tell you they don't love you no more? You ever had that happen to you? So I wonder how that must feel to God each time that he loves us so completely. We don't love him back. All right. So in step 11, what we really want to learn how to do is we want to learn how to do something for God. And what better way to do something for God than the 12th step? Step 11 keys us to the power of God, and step 12 exercises that power where it can do the most good, helping others. Does that make sense? All right. So, at this point in recovery, you shouldn't be sober anymore out of fear. You should be sober out of joy. Okay? And that's what step 12 means. All the defects I had when I got here are needed for a spiritual experience. From my weakness through the 12th step, I find spiritual strength. So I'm 12 steps away from the pipe or a drink or a needle. Okay? And what is the 12th step? Well, let's see what the book says. Having had a spiritual awakening, as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So a spiritual awakening can be defined in many ways, but a reordering of priorities, a kind of a new understanding, a reordering of my emotions, if you will. Okay? That's what an awakening spiritually is. So the first part of the 12th step is a promise. Having had a spiritual awakening. The promise is that I will awaken spiritually as a result of doing these 11 steps. And there's 3 parts to this step. So the first part is the promise, right? That you can expect to awaken spiritually if you practice the first 11 steps. The second part of the step is about carrying the message to the alcoholic. It says we carry this message. And hopefully, if you sat through this whole 28 weeks here, you understand much better what this message is. And by understanding what this message is, you understand what this message is not. And too many people carry what this message is not, rather than carry what this message really is. So we carry this message to alcoholics. And then the third part, and people always say this is the toughest part, it's because they want to balk, but to practice these principles in all our affairs. Okay, so what we're going to try to do is try to go over what this is really talking about. So the first thing is we carried this message. Let's talk about that. So what is the message? It's a simple message, so don't complicate it. Here's a program that works. Wow, how simple is that? Here's a program that works. The message is that the first 11 steps will give me a spiritual awakening. It's helping the addict or the alcoholic find out what the problem is. Not my opinion of that, but what it says in the doctor's opinion in chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? And it's helping the newcomer come to believe that there's a power greater than himself that can restore him to sanity. Again, we find that information in the big book in chapters 2 and 4. Not my opinion of that, but how it's written. So it's a message of a program of action that guarantees a spiritual awakening. And again, not my opinion on how that happens, ever, but rather what the big book says in chapters 5 and 6. The message is to help the sufferers to see the problem, progressive illness that progresses throughout sobriety, to help them find the solution, and to help guide them through actually working the program of action. And we can now sit down with another alcoholic, another individual who has the same problem, similar to our own, and convey an understanding that no one else can. We speak their language, right? So we carry the message. We do not carry out the message. And that's important. We carry the message. We do not carry out the message. But in carrying the message, I always find something that I need to be reminded of, something that I need to know, and something that I need to learn in carrying the message. It always happens. So I want to say this, that the spiritual awakening comes from a result of the steps. Right? That's what this thing just said. So we don't promote the recovery. We don't affect the recovery. We just carry the recovery message. And as a result of that, we get something that happens for us. Try now. I'll try.
When you say we carry the message, we don't carry out the message, you're saying we can't do it for them? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we can't affect a result. Or we can't even affect an action.
We can't take the steps for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So we carry the message, we don't carry out the message. It is impossible for us to carry out the message to a sponsee. All we do is carry the message to them. We don't try to affect a result. Because if we're trying to affect the result, and we're going to talk more about this next week, because next week is all going to be about sponsorship. But if we're trying to affect the result, because many people believe that that's what our job is, right? I have to affect the result, that you need to be sober because I'm working with you, okay? And that's just not what we're supposed to be doing here. I don't try to affect the result. If I'm trying to affect the result, then I think that I have some power. And all I am is a channel of carrying this message to you. Not trying to carry out the message. I'm just trying to carry the message to you. What you do with that information is your business. If you choose to suffer, drink and use and go and do what you got to do, that's none of my business, you know. So if you start suffering, guess what? I'm not going to suffer with you. But if I'm trying to affect the result, then I'm going to have negative feelings and emotions that I'm not getting the result that I'm trying to get. And so the action for me is to carry the message and leave it alone. What you do with that information is totally your business. So I just carry the message. I don't try to affect the result of that. So I don't carry out the message. Does that make sense?
You would have really hung up on that, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did too, you know, at the beginning. I sponsored a guy and he went out and I thought to myself, I'm his sponsor. How can he go out?
I never did. I figured you had to kill him.
Don't he realize who his sponsor is? What's he doing? Getting out, going out.
Well, I mean, it's not, I want to use, so call me. Like, I'm gonna have the power to talk you out of it, or make you stop feeling that way. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, every time somebody calls me and tells me they want to drink or they want to use, I say, what? Somebody calls me, I want to use, I tell them, why are you calling me? I'm not the dope man. And they go, well, you're supposed to talk me out of it, right? No. Well, listen, I'm not here to make you stop using. I'm here for those that want help that don't want to use. So he said, well, that's why I'm calling you. I said, well, why don't you say so? That's not what you said. What you said to me was you want to use. And what I said to you in reply to that was, why are you calling me? I'm not the dope man. You see? And then they go, okay, I'm calling you because I really don't want to use. I said, oh, now we're getting somewhere. You really don't want to use. Okay. Have you got on your knees? You know, and we go through, you know, a litany of what he can do to try to help him in that moment. But yeah, so it's very important. And people do get way carried away with that and get all twisted with that. But it's very important that we carry the message. We do not carry out the message. We carry the alcoholic. We carry the message. We don't carry the alcoholic.
I think it's easy for newcomers. And I mean, I probably did it too, looking back. I think we tend to put our sponsors in the place that our higher power is, or should be.
Yeah.
I did at first, and then my sponsor called me and said, will you get some beer to come over? And I said, you don't want me getting beer to coming over. And I mean, it just shocked me, and I had her way up on a pedestal, you know. And yeah, so, but now.
Well, you had the wrong sponsor.
Oh, dude, but she had 7 years, and you know, I thought that she was, you know, she spoke so beautifully, and we did all this stuff. And you know, it was downtown in my garden that I had across the homeless shelter, and she said, you know, get some beer and come over, because she was a mutual friend. And I'm like,
Yeah, when your sponsor asks you to go on a beer run, that's not a good thing.
it wasn't.
Or you go over their house and they use their big book to chop the weed up. You know, that's not a good thing.
It really showed me, and I got another one that says that it really showed me, you know, just the humanness, and the raw alcoholic, and you know, it taught, she was so powerful in my life, and so it really taught me that we're all just
Yeah.
both of us. Yeah, that's true.
So here's the thing. What we were just talking about that. The steps are not designed to make you stop using. You've heard me say that many times during this whole thing. Not using is only the beginning of recovery, right? The steps are designed to change you through an awakening spiritually to where you won't want to use. So if they haven't gone through the awakening, they're probably not at the point where they don't want to use. They're probably still at the point where using is always an option to them, right? You see, because the truth is we can't sell recovery. We can't sell the admission of powerlessness, nor can we sell or give away the desire to stop using. We can't do that. That's not our job. That is beyond us. That's why we only carry the message. We don't carry out the message because we're incapable of doing what I just said. Okay? So if you don't like the way you're living inside your stomach, inside your head, if you don't want anybody else to know how you feel inside your stomach and inside your head, but you can hardly hide it anymore, and you can't continue to live that way, maybe you're ready to say, I need some help. And if you will do certain actions gradually, you'll start to live differently. And you will feel differently as a result, and you won't have to use in that process. Very important. Let me say that again. If you will do certain actions gradually, you're going to feel different, and you're going to live different, and you won't use in the process. So there's no magic. There's no secret. If there's a secret, the secret is that if you take certain steps that are suggested as a program of recovery, which makes it no secret, you will so reorder your perception of life that you'll be able to live in this world without having to escape you. You'll be able to live in this world as you without having to escape you or the world through alcohol and drugs. Now that may sound like a lot of far out stuff, but it's really basically exactly what we do here, right? If you take certain steps that are suggested as a program of recovery, you will so reorder your perception of life that you'll be able to live as you in this world without having to escape you or the world through alcohol and drugs. So many people come to recovery, but so few wind up staying. And I believe that a necessary ingredient is they have to hit bottom. Have to hit bottom. They have to be desperate and terrified. Because nobody that didn't hit a bottom would do the things like come to believe that a power greater than themselves can restore them to sanity. Why would they do that? No one who hasn't hit a desperate bottom would stay around long enough to make a decision to turn their will and their life over to the care of God. Why? If they're not desperate and terrified about how they've been living, why in the world would they try to turn their will and their life over to a power greater than themselves? It's just something that they really wouldn't do. You know why? Only desperate people will do that. So desperation is a saving grace for people like us. Because only desperate people will turn around and do the things that are necessary in order for them to recover from this disease. So only people who are terrified about how they're living. And if you're not terrified and you're not desperate, how could you, or why would you, make a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself? Just think about that for a minute. If you're not desperate and terrified about how you've been living every day, why would you sit down and make a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself? Why in the world would you do that? The answer is you wouldn't. So the people that get to that point, maybe got to that point, maybe had a true desire to change and get sober when they got here, but they were rushed through steps 1, 2, and 3 just to get to step 4. Like we spent so many weeks on 1, 2, and 3 in here, really going over a lot of stuff. And one of the things I told you way back then is that when you understand, really who you are, then you're not going to drink or use anymore. You can't drink and use on the truth. And I think these people that get here, they get sent right through 1, 2, and 3, and they're not desperate and terrified anymore because they've been sitting in the room for a couple of months and everybody's hugging them and telling them to keep coming back, and they started eating and sleeping on a normal basis, and they're no longer terrified and desperate about how they've been living because they haven't been living that way for weeks and months now, you know what I mean? So now they have to sit down and they have to do a searching and fearless moral inventory. Can't do it. They can't do it. They think they can do it. They think they are doing it. Their sponsor thinks they're doing it, but they can't do it. Only people that are truly desperate and terrified about how they've been living can actually sit down and do a searching fearless moral inventory. Does that make any sense, what I'm saying? And then choose a stranger to share that shit with. Oh, are you kidding me?
Why people sit on their horse. Some people.
Yeah,
Some people.
yeah,
Maybe one of the reasons why some people sit.
sure. Good point. But then think about this. Think about this. Now they know what's coming next. Now they got to share this with somebody. That ain't happening.
Then they get loaded.
What about told about people that are in such shithole places and they have to be desperate and they're not, like they still, I mean, they're nothing, you know?
Yeah.
How do you not be desperate?
So, I'm always leery. I love the people that come in and talk about how bad they want to drink or get some dope. I'm leery about the people that talk, oh, this program is great. It really works. 30 days, Not to knock them off a pink cloud, but let's get busy doing some real stuff here. Yeah. So people who are committed to their own recovery at all costs stay here. Those of us who remember the terrified desperation get to stay here. I'm a couple months away from 29 years sober. 29 years? Yeah, 29 years sober. And I remember it just like yesterday, how desperate and terrified I was when I got here. November 21st, 1991. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things we hear a lot when it comes to sponsors. Now let's save that for the sponsor part. Yeah. Yeah, we'll save that for the sponsor part. We'll put that here. And that here. And that here. Okay. So, let's go to the book. So on page 60. No, I'm sorry. Page 89. Let's, for a minute, it says, and practice these principles in all our affairs. What affairs do we have? What affairs do we have that we're going to practice these principles with? Yes. Work, home. No, it's not. You have an affair as a parent today? Oh, okay. Uh-huh. Well, okay. So, all of our affairs. Okay, we all have many different types of affairs. All right. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. So, if I remember that they're very ill when I'm working with them, I need to remember that I'm working with somebody that's very ill. And I also need to remember for my own sanity is that when I walk into a room of AA or CA or wherever I'm walking into, I'm in a room full of people that are very ill. Okay. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Let's go over to the next page. It says, when you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. This advice is given for his family also. So, I mean, right there is kind of your answer for the people that don't want to get real and don't want to do the work. Don't waste time trying to stop them, trying to get them to stop drinking. The family should realize that they should be patient, realizing they're dealing with a sick person. If there is any indication that he wants to stop, have a good talk with that person. Most interested in him, usually his wife. Get an idea of his behavior, his problems, his background, the seriousness of his condition, and his religious leanings. You need this information to put yourself in his place to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. So now, that's a suggestion that doesn't happen very often, does it? When I work with somebody, I always ask about their family situation. If they're married, kids, they live with their parents, what's going on? Tell me about your wife, tell me about your kids, tell me about your mother, tell me about your father, all that kind of stuff. And eventually I get to meet them, but I don't go out to get with them at the beginning. Sometimes it is wise to wait till he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in a dangerous physical condition, it's better to risk it. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk, unless he's ugly and the family needs your help. Wait for the end of the spree, or at least for a lucid interval. Then let the family or friend ask him if he wants to quit for good, and if he would go to any extreme to do so. If he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. And, you know, it's quite different today, because today most people come to the meetings. They didn't have that back then. So people come to meetings, but, you know, when they come to meetings, some people do come to meetings because the judge or the wife or the husband is making them. And that's an indication that they certainly have a problem, though they may not see that. They may just, I'm shutting them up, or I'm appeasing them, or I'm doing what I have to do. But it is, you know, if everybody tells you got a tail, you need to take a look. You should be described to him as one of a fellowship who, as part of their own recovery, try to help others, who will be glad to talk to him if he cares to see you. If he does not want to see you, never force yourself upon him. Neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him much about you. They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. You might place the book where he can see it in the interval. Here, no specific rule can be given. The family must decide these things, but urge them not to be over anxious, for that may spoil matters. Then here on page 91 down, a few paragraphs down, see your man alone if possible. At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. And they usually get that in meetings when they hear somebody share. And when, you know, they hear somebody share the shit that they've been doing, I tell you back at step one, you can't begin to recover until you begin to relate. So once you start to relate, you can begin to recover. When he sees you know all about drinking, the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. We suggest you do this as we have done in the chapter on alcoholism. If he is an alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. So again, he's just talking about relating, right? If you're satisfied that he's a real alcoholic, now it tells us we don't judge anybody, we don't tell anybody they're alcoholic, but if you're satisfied that the person's an alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless features of the malady. Show him, from your own experience, how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the will. Don't, at this stage, refer to the book, unless he has seen it and wishes to discuss it. And be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can, if he's not or too far alcoholic. But insist that if he is severely afflicted, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. And there again, body and mind, nothing about the spiritual, right? Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. So even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask that question, if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. So that's the second condition on the second step there. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles. Okay. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. And if he's religious, on the bottom of this page it says, admit that he probably knows more about it, this religion than you do, but calls to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. So in other words, I've sponsored plenty of people over the years that were very religious, much more religious than me, but they couldn't get sober. So, now on page 94. Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. And then make it clear that he's not under pressure, that if he don't have to see you again if he doesn't want to, and if he wants somebody else to help him, don't get offended, all that. Maybe you have disturbed. It says if your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. So this is kind of contradictory to what we hear people share in the rooms all the time about dealing with baby gloves with these people, You're the most important person in the room. No, you're not. I am. We love you. Keep coming back, and don't listen to all that stuff. You do it. This is telling me here that if I've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism, this is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. So, when somebody goes back out, a lot of people in the room will tell him, oh, that's okay. It's okay. You're back now. It's okay. I've never, ever said to anybody that's gone back out when they come back in that it's okay. Because the truth of the matter is, it's not okay. It's not okay to go back out. If you hurt people the way I hurt people when I'm out there, it's not okay. It is not okay. So I would say to somebody, are you done with that shit now? Was it any good? Did you like it? Did you have fun? Why are you back here? Yeah, was it worth it? Why are you playing with this shit? Why don't you go back out and get you a really good one? The more you disturb them about this, the better. So those kind of things are better than, oh, it's okay, we're glad you're back, we love you.
It's like that, relapses are part of recovery. It's absolutely not. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of recovery.
Yeah, we said that way back in the first step. Relapse is anything but recovery.
I am glad though when people are back. I mean, like, it may not be okay, but I think it's pretty miracle that any of us sit here today. I think it's amazing.
Well, it is a miracle and it is amazing. But you got to call a spade a spade. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, guess what? It's a fucking duck.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not a dove in disguise. It's not a dove, it's a
well, I
duck.
like the perspective if you hurt people the way I hurt people when I'm out. It's not okay.
It is not okay to go back out. If it were okay to go back out, why are you here? Why are you back here?
I just am always stunned.
I said that in a meeting one time. Somebody was come shared that they just come back in, and somebody shared right after them, oh, it's okay. You're here. That's all that counts. We're glad you're here. And I shared after that. It's not okay. I said, if it was okay to go back out, why are you here? That's what I asked in the middle of a meeting. Why are you here? If it's okay to go back out, why are you here? It must not be okay to go back out if you crawled back in here.
I'm here because it's not. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. You just said it. You're here because it's not okay. You're here because it's not okay. So don't tell people that it is okay, because it ain't. Went back out. Oh, it's okay. Well, you're back. That's all that counts. No, it's not okay. So the more hopeless he feels, the better. He may be more likely to follow your suggestions. And so all of this next page, we're going to talk about this when we do the sponsor thing next week. At the bottom of page 95 says, if he thinks he can do the job in some other way or prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us. So we don't have a lock on sobriety. There's other ways to get sober. I just went to my brother's memorial, and he was 40-something years sober and never been to a meeting. So I know there's other ways to get sober. And he had a good life, and there was a ton of people there that he had helped over the years in his way with his thing. Nothing like our way. I point out that we alcoholics have much in common, and you would like, in any case, to be friendly and let it go at that. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. So that's a good lesson right there. Let's go over to page 98. On bottom of 97, it says, for the type of alcoholic who is able and willing to get well Little charity in ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such action is warranted. This may seem inconsistent, but we think it is not. So is that not confusing to you guys, is it? Is that clear? Okay. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trust in God and clean house. There it is right there, man. That's it in a nutshell. That job or no job, wife or no wife, you can get sober if you want to. Go to 99, page 99. The bottom of 99 is telling us kind of the same thing. Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. That's me. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God. We have seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. That's me. My wife, anyway. We have seen others slip when the family came back too soon. And now this next paragraph is the 12-step promise. And you might want to mark your book here. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hand were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. That's the 12-step promise. So now here on the bottom of page 100, it says, if you have been successful in solving your own domestic problems, tell the newcomer's family how that was accomplished. In this way, you can set them on the right track without becoming critical of them. The story of how you and your wife settled your difficulties is worth any amount of criticism. Assuming we are spiritually fit, and pay attention to that first word. Assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. Perhaps people have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking scenes. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles when we go into their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded about alcohol at all. Our experience shows this is not entirely so. We meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. His only chance for sobriety would be someplace like the Greenland ice cap, and even there, an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. Now, some years ago, a lady was sharing, she had, I can't remember, 12, 15 years sober, and she was sharing that when she goes down the aisle in the supermarket, and where I don't think it was here in Oklahoma, because I don't think they have liquor here in the aisles, right? But where we were at the time, where I was at the time, wherever that was, that she goes down the aisle. Oh, yeah, she goes down the aisle. She can't go down that certain aisle that has the wine bottles in it. So I was talking to one of the guys that I was working with, sponsoring after the meeting, And I asked him, "What do you think about what that lady said?" And he said, "I don't know." He says, I think it's, I understand that. I said, "Really?" I said, "Do you think that's um, a message of recovery?" And he said, "Well, it sounded like it was honest. It was honest doesn't mean it's a message of recovery. You know, I mean, I may hate you if I tell you I hate you. That's honest. Is that a message of recovery?" Honest does not constitute message of recovery. I said, with 12 or 15 years sober, think about the newcomer that's sitting there thinking, am I going to be 12 years? I'm not going to be able to go down the aisle because there's booze down that aisle. So listen what the Alcoholics Anonymous says about that. We meet these conditions every day. Drinking scenes, going into bars, our friends' houses we meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous saying, if you can't handle that kind of shit, there's something the matter with your spiritual status. I hate being in meetings when people and nod their head. Somebody's sharing shit like that, and they nod their head like, yeah, that's right. No, it's not right. Stop encouraging that kind of bullshit in the rooms, and we'll have a better percentage of people getting sober. Because we sit in the rooms and we blame all of our defects and all of our bad habits on I'm an alcoholic. Stop blaming alcoholism for you being a fuck up. I'm a fuck up in some things, and it ain't got nothing to do with me being alcoholic. It's got to do with, what it's got to do with? It's got to do with me being a fuck up. And if I can't walk down the aisle because there's wine bottles there's something the matter with my spiritual status. That is not what recovery is talking about. That is not a message of recovery. That's a sick message of somebody that doesn't have this deal. There's something the matter with their spiritual status. And the book says that. It's not me knocking them. It's the book, what the book says about them. So if we can't meet these conditions every day like we should be, there's something the matter with my spiritual status. It says, in our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. Yeah. It says if the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. Not sometimes, not a lot of times, have always failed. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there is drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. That includes bars, nightclubs, dances, receptions, weddings, even plain ordinary whoopee parties. Love that. To a person who has had experience with an alcoholic, this may seem like tempting providence, but it isn't. It isn't. It's not tempting providence. If you are sober, and we talked about last week, we talked about that if God is all powerful, and I believe that he is, and God has all knowledge, and I believe that he does, and God dwells in all of us, and I believe that he does, then it goes without saying that I have all the knowledge and the power to handle any situation in front of me with God in me. Any situation. And that's what they're saying here. And you will note that we made an important qualification. Therefore, ask yourself on each occasion, have I any good social, business, or personal reason for going to this place? Or am I expecting to steal a little vicarious pleasure from the atmosphere of such places? Now, I don't know if they still have the sober nightclub here. They still have the sober nightclub? They used to have a sober nightclub here. And I sponsored guys, and they used to go there in the early in their sobriety. I used to tell them, man, you know what? You shouldn't go there. You know, I mean, they had some parties there. People in the AA would have a party, and they'd use that place. And it was a bar. It's got a bar, but they had coffee and juices and stuff, and then pool table, and a little back room, and tables over here, right? It's a bar. It's no longer an alcohol bar. And it was a sober nightclub. It had a dance floor and a DJ booth. And I'd say to them, you know, why are you going to a place that has everything in it except for the alcohol? Because that's the places that you always went to. And that's what the book calls a little vicarious. What do you say? A little vicarious pleasure. So that's dangerous, those kind of places. Now, there's no reason to go. And they would hang out there every weekend. I don't know about you, but when I go to a place that has a bar and pool tables and a dance floor, if that's where I'm hanging out, I want to have a drink. And I don't want to drink. So why would I go to a place where I associate with having a drink? Or going to the bathroom and doing some lines, you know. None of that stuff, right? Okay, so let's talk about for a minute here. Let's talk about practicing these principles in all our affairs. So what does that really mean? What is that really saying to you? We've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. What does that mean? Do you get that? Practice these principles in all our affairs. You get it? What does it mean? What does it mean? See, because if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it.
I think it's like step 3 to do, affairs. Push the goddamn grocery cart out the window.
Practice these principles in all my affairs. I need to act like a sober, spiritual person that is trying to practice spiritual principles in my life and trying to align myself with God's will. I need to act that way. When back in the third step, or the second step, when they asked, is God is everything or is he nothing? And everybody said he's everything. And I said, why don't you act that way? So I'm going to practice these principles. What principles? The 12 steps in all my affairs. I need to act like I'm a sober person. I need to act like I'm living spiritual principles in my life. Do I do it 100% of the time every day? Of course not. But do I do it much more than I don't do it? Of course I do. So, and I'm not going to fall back on the things. It's progress, not perfection. But the truth of the matter is, it is progress, not perfection. If you could look back on your sobriety and say that this year, I'm a little bit better of a person than I was last year. And you know better than anybody. Or your spouse may know just as well. But if you can really look at yourself in the mirror and say that you are a better person now than you were last year, and you're more on a spiritual path, then something is right and something is working. And that is practicing these principles in all your affairs. We don't get to pick and choose which affairs We're going to practice what principles? We practice them in all of our affairs. That's what it says, all our affairs.
And I know quick when I have it. You know,
You what?
I know quickly when I have it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
Those little things.
I'm just trying to pay attention to my conversations. What my conversations sound like with my wife, kids, coworkers, accounts, customers, strangers, customer service people. When I'm not happy with something, you know, if they're fighting and full of anger and, you know, fighting, then something's wrong with me. You know, I'm not doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when you just simply walking into the store and having an exchange with the person behind the counter, you know, it could be, give me a pack of gum. Or it could be, hi, how are you today? Can I have a pack of gum, please? You know, one is, I am straight with God and I'm connected, and the other one is Danny's running the show.
That's just little things. Like today I was driving and somebody's on my butt, and I just immediately, I don't pause, think about it. I could have just moved over, I slammed on my brakes. And then, but I thought of that. I thought, man, that is, why couldn't I just move over?
Yeah.
You know, and let him go.
It depends, you know, it just.
I don't have a problem driving anymore. When I'm driving, if somebody's coming up on me, I move over.
Well, normally.
Because for years and years and years, when I'm coming up on somebody, I want them to get out my way. And then I just get out their way. No big deal.
There's somebody rude to somebody else.
So, practicing these principles in all our affairs is the willingness. When we talked about back in the last step, we talked about being able to bring God into the moment. Remember we talked about that? Bring God into the moment of what's going on here and now. And it's a different situation when I do that. All right, so we're going to leave it off there. Next week, we're going to talk all about sponsorship, carrying the message, the 12th step, and then we are done. So if you have any questions next week about sponsorship, write them down, and we will discuss them next week, because there's lots of things. And that is it. Thank you for being here and being there. See you guys next week.